Hello there, everyone. Hello there, everyone. Luciano Oliveira here. Today is Sunday, February the 4th, and we're starting one more live stream. As usual, participants have a priority in terms of topics to be discussed. So I can see we have a couple of participants as we speak. Feel free, to type your topics of interest so we can get started. Warm up. I just had a consultation with a company interested in bringing employers from abroad to Brazil to work under a regular work position. So just a distinction, while the digital nomad visa, which is super popular nowadays, it is for foreign citizens working in Brazil, but for an employer abroad, meaning they are working remotely for from home, from the beach, from a computer, basically. The traditional work visas in Brazil are for foreign citizens working for a Brazilian employer. So this is the main distinction. So if you're going to work for a Brazilian employer, you need a traditional work visa. But if you're going to be working for an employer abroad while you're in Brazil, then the digital nomad visa is going to be the ideal match for you. There is an update on the Brazil retirement visa, another very popular visa here at the firm. Currently, the Brazilian immigration is asking for the traditional apostille and sworn translation for most documents. Before, the Brazilian immigration would ask for an apostille on the birth certificate only. But again, for the Brazil retirement visa, now the apostille requirement is being extended to other documents, such as the proof of retirement funds, which could be, for instance, a printout of your 401k, of your IRA, of your pension funds, and so on. This document now needs to get an apostille, and that's going to be the same thing for your criminal records, and that's going to be the same thing for your proof of capability of wiring funds abroad. So altogether, 4 different documents that are going to need an apostille, which is something new. At the beginning, we would be able to get a retirement application approved with just the birth certificate apostilled, but not anymore. So for other applicants, let's say if you're not applying for a retirement visa, what you should consider is that the Brazilian federal government, the new administration by President Lula, it's applying changes to the immigration system as we speak. We are tracking other changes, so this is one of the most recent ones. Okay, another question. So, what are the remaining paths for permanent residency? So I'm not talking about the temporary visas such as the digital nomad or the Brazil retirement. What are the specific routes for a permanent residency in Brazil? The 3 main routes for permanent residency in Brazil, or better saying, the 4 main routes are going to be permanent residency by marriage, meaning you are married to a Brazilian spouse. The second route is permanent residency by childbirth, meaning that if you have a child in Brazil, you can immediately apply for permanent residency. That's the second route. Third route, permanent residency by investment in real estate. That's the third route. And the fourth route, which traditionally we don't like much here at the firm, is a permanent residency by investment in a business. Okay, these are the 4 main routes. There are a few others, but they're more like on an exception basis. The four main ones are those routes we just told you about. Any other topics of interest? I see we have several participants, but so far, no questions that I can see. Feel free to type into the chat a window that you're seeing. To access the chat window, you must be subscribed to the channel. So if you don't see such an option, remember you need to subscribe. And another thing, you must log in into your YouTube account. Otherwise, you're not going to have an option to type questions or topics or comments, whatever you want to have participation here at the channel. Okay? So let's take a look at. So we have here Sadiq Adekunye. Welcome, Sadiq. Hello, Oliveira. I don't know how much frequent you get this question. So many articles online say that the residency by investment via the real estate could get one citizenship after 4 years. Yes, we spoke a few other times here, Sadiq, but I'm happy to address. The point is, like, in the Brazilian legal system, just like in other countries, there are multiple regulations and laws addressing immigration, and sometimes there is like a conflict between a law and a regulation. So there is the so-called Lei do Imigrante, which is basically a single law addressing the rights from foreign citizens in Brazil. And in such law, it says that a foreign citizen living in Brazil for 4 years could have an opportunity to apply for the Brazilian citizenship, right? So the law says 4 years. Now, when you look at the regulation for the, Brazil residency through investment, it says that your first 4 years, they are going to be basically a temporary residency. And after these first 4 years, then you're going to be entitled to the permanent residency. And when you look at the law that says that you are able to apply for the citizenship in 4 years, the understanding is that this condition of 4 years is of permanent residency, right? So to make this distinction even more clear, let's say if you are in Brazil just as a tourist and for some reason you are unable to leave the country, let's say if you have like a very serious accident, right? Like, I mean, and you are unable to fly out of Brazil and you just stay in Brazil for 4 years, obviously you're not going to qualify to apply for the citizenship just because you stayed in Brazil for 4 years. You stayed in Brazil for 4 years because you could not leave the country, but you're not a permanent resident. So in this situation, it's crystal clear that you cannot apply for the citizenship. And for the investment in real estate, our interpretation here at the firm, which is the more, let's say, legal based interpretation, is that first you get 4 years as a temporary residence, and only after that you're going to have the 4 years as a permanent resident, which is the basis for the citizenship application, okay? Now, other websites, they don't get into the legal nuances. They just say, well, you 4 years in Brazil and you can apply for the citizenship, right? So it's not just like 4 years. You got to be a qualifying 4 years. Now, this said, we know, or we have like history here at the firm of applicants staying for 4 years in Brazil under the residency through real estate, and in 4 years they are applying for their citizenship, and they end up getting the citizenship. So the way we are advising our clients is, listen, if you haven't been in Brazil for 4 years, after acquiring the residency through real estate. You've been for 4 years, you take a shot, you try it, right? Like, I mean, through a more diligent or narrow interpretation of the law, you're not really entitled, right? But if you try it and if you get it, good for you. If you don't get it, that means that the Brazilian immigration is interpreting the law from a more narrow perspective, and you just need to stay an additional 4 years to be entitled to get the citizenship. Okay, so these are the two different interpretations nowadays. I hope that helps with your planning, Sadiq. Keith, welcome back. Can legal firearm be brought into the country if you're buying property? No, firearms like in Brazil, even for you to have a firearm, residence. So we're not talking about a carry-on license. We're talking about a keep-at-home license. It does require a large number of requirements to be met. So if you're buying property, I'm going to assume you're saying I buy a property, I become a legal resident. Okay, so if you are a legal resident, you would need to acquire a number of licenses prior to be able to have a weapon at home, right? Like a legal firearm. Now, when you apply for this license, usually you're gonna need to disclose information about the firearm. And so here, if you're just bringing firearm into the country, let's say truth, like in your luggage, right? My concern here is that you're gonna arrive at the country without the license up front, and most probably your firearm is gonna be taken at the customs. Okay, you're gonna have an opportunity, of course, to try to retrieve this firearm later down the road, but because you're gonna need to hire a customs broker, I don't think that this is a recommended path, because the costs that you're going to incur with the customs broker, the license application, and paying whatever fee pay for the importation of such firearm, potentially, or penalties, I don't think it is a good idea, Keith. I think it is just too much work and stress and uncertainty. And if having a firearm is important for you, my recommendation is that you get the property, you get the legal residency, and then you buy a firearm in Brazil upon securing the needed licenses that are going to be linked to the specific firearm that you're going to be buying. All right, Donna, welcome back, Donna. I'm born in New York. I don't plan on returning there. I'll be leaving from Texas. Do I apostille the income and background from Texas, my current location, and my birth certificate from New York? That's correct, Donna. That's correct. Because you're talking about income, I would assume you're probably talking about the Brazil retirement visa. So correct me if I'm wrong, okay? The birth certificate, like if you were born in New York, that's correct. The birth certificate must be apostilled in New York, right? If you're living in Texas and you have your background check, right? You're gonna get the FBI in Texas. And if you're gonna be using your income, your retirement income from, while you live in Texas, Texas would be the ideal place for you to get the apostille on both the income and the background check as well. All right, Donna. So that's from a very high level understanding of your situation. Once you're getting closer to start on this route, I recommend a consultation, because then there are probably other 10 questions we're going to be asking to make sure you're going to be handling these things at the right place. WS, oi, tudo bem? What can you say about ATMs, Uber SIM cards? How easy it is to find a place to stay for 2 or 3 days, or even a month here or there in different cities? Bill, listen, whenever you're talking about short-term rentals, Airbnb, it works great in Brazil. So let's say if you don't have a Brazilian tax ID known as a CPF, Airbnb is going to work just great because Airbnb is going to be the intermediary between you as a foreign citizen and the Brazilian party as the hoster, right? So I would strongly recommend Airbnb for you to find the places to stay in Brazil. And to give an example, even myself, right? Let's say when I travel to Brasilia, we have a lot of activities in Brasilia because of the embassies over there. So I'm gonna use Airbnb, right? And interesting enough, most often than not in Brasilia, I'm gonna get a hotel. Right? So I get a hotel through Airbnb, and it's super streamlined, right? Like I don't need to fill out forms, I don't need to give out a bunch of information. So I myself, I use Airbnb whenever I'm traveling around because it's just a couple of clicks, right? Like I find the property, I see that the property is well ranked, like other people have had good experiences at that place. I can see if it is a hotel or not. I can see what's included with it, whatever fee they are charging. And basically, I just, click a couple of times and then I get the place, right? So that's my recommendation for you, Bill, in terms of finding a place to stay. Another very good thing about Airbnb, even if you want to stay for a whole month or even a couple of months, you're going to find several listings allowing you to stay for a more longer term. And the good news is that usually the hosts, they are going to give you a discount, like if you're staying for longer than a week, if you're staying for longer than a month, and potentially for longer than a couple of months. Okay, Bill? In terms of ATMs, I like to recommend the Bradesco. Bradesco, they have a pretty straightforward interface, a pretty straightforward interface. You can use like a Chase Bank card, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, whatever you think about in terms of US banks and of course, European banks or international banks in general. You go to Bradesco, they have the menu is going to be in your target language, usually English. They probably have other languages. So when you enter your card, when you insert your card, Bradesco is going to be able to identify, where you're coming from. They are going to offer you options for you to withdraw Brazilian reais. And in my experience, the limit that Bradesco offers is going to be higher than the limit that other banks are going to offer. I did use like Banco do Brasil is also, I also heard good things about Banco do Brasil, but I had a couple of bad experiences with Banco do Brasil. Itaú, I don't know, for some reasons, I tried to use Itaú with like foreign cards, could not use. So my go-to bank, it's going to be Bradesco, all right? So we spoke about ATM, we spoke about Airbnb, Uber. If you have a Uber account from the US or from Europe or from any other country, in theory, you can use an Uber in Brazil. Uber is super popular in major Brazilian cities. In the past, there was, you would find a kind of wall at airports, meaning you could not get a Uber in an airport. Nowadays, for most airports, there is actually a dedicated area for Uber and similar service. So Uber is also working pretty consistent in Brazil. And SIM cards, it's always a pain in the neck because SIM cards, they are going to ask for a Brazilian tax ID CPF. Even if you have a CPF, but you applied from abroad, sometimes you may have a glitch because in the process of getting your SIM card activated, they want to know in which Brazilian state you are based. So if you got a Brazilian tax ID from abroad, guess what? It's not associated with a Brazilian state, and therefore you may have an issue with getting a SIM card. And if that's the case, maybe you're going to have a friend. Brazilians are pretty quick to help out foreign citizens. Maybe you have a Brazilian friend, and you could ask your Brazilian friend to activate the SIM card. All right, Bill, I hope this helps. Keith, I will be in Brazil in July. I am an American citizen. If I'm considering buying a property in Brazil in say around 5 to 10, would it help to go ahead and get my CPF while there in July, or should I just wait? I think it is a good idea to get your CPF, should upfront. Brazil is changing a lot of these policies, like the CPF has been changing. The visa requirement for U.S. citizens, it has been postponed for 3 times. So we know as a fact that the Brazilian federal administration is trying to change things as we speak. So, if you are able to get the CPF taken care up front, I think it is good. Just because you have a CPF, it doesn't mean you are becoming a tax resident, all right? There is no such presumption. It's very common for U.S. citizens or, foreign citizens in general to get a CPF tax ID just for the sake of buying a property, and buying a property does not equal to becoming a tax resident. So I see no problem with your plan of getting a CPF upfront. So when the right occasion, when the right opportunity shows up, Keith, you're going to be in a better position to make an offer and getting into a purchase agreement. Terry Roswell, welcome, Terry. Hi, Luciana. Just a funny nuance, Terry. Luciana is actually the feminine of my name. And it's funny because I know a lot of people, they mix up the O and A. So there are several names ending in O and A, like Luciana, Eduardo, Eduarda, right? Luciano, Luciana, Eduardo, Eduarda, okay? Many other Brazilian names, when they end in O, you meaning like the male version of the name. When it ends in A, you're talking about the feminine version, right? But that's a very common mix-up, so of course, no offense taken. I'm just sharing for your learning about Brazilian personal names, okay? So it's Luciano with an O, meaning male version. Luciana is the feminine version. Is the $2,000 a month requirement for the retirement visa a pre-tax amount or an after-tax amount? So the Brazilian authority is not going to look at the taxation aspects. So there would be a pre-tax amount, right? So let's say if you're getting $2,000 a month, well, let's say if the taxation, if the U.S., if the IRS is going to take, I don't know, like $200 out of the $2,000, the Brazilian authority is not going to look at it, okay? And at least here at the firm, the more frequent evidence of monthly income is going to be a summary statement of your retirement account. And usually such retirement account statements, they are not going to be addressing tax cuts. They are going to be just showing the most basic information about the retirement account, such as how much you have. For instance, if it is like annuities, let's say you have, I don't know, like $1 million in your annuity account, they're going to say you have, I don't know, like $2,200 a month being received monthly. And this is what they are more concerned about. I know there are pension funds, particularly from the military, if I'm not mistaken. Sometimes they do show a breakdown of the many components. And if the retirement account statement, it is showing a breakdown of the taxes being taken out of the payment, then yes. In this particular case, I think it would be much better for you to show that the net amount after tax amount is over 2,000, because for this particular example, the Brazilian authority is going to be able to see that you are actually taking home less than $2,000 a month, right? So I would say it's probably on a case by case basis. For annuities, most of the time they do not show the taxation being taken out of the check that's being sent to you. But for, again, just for is this specific example, for military pensions from the US, as far as I remember, they do show a breakdown for the tax amount and the net amount that you're taking home. So if the final amount is showing lower than $2,000, I think you would be better off to add something to the table, such as a savings account. Remember, if you are unable to meet the $2,000 a month requirement, you may complement with something that's not purely retirement related, such as savings, right? Like, I mean, savings is not in theory a retirement account, but you can use like some money that you're getting out of a savings account as a complement to meet the $2,000 month requirement for the retirement visa. All right, WS, I think it was Bill. Yes, it is Bill. What is the required income per month for a retirement visa? Yes, Bill. So that's so interesting. Like, your question came right after Terry's question, and we've been discussing for a few minutes. So the amount needed is $2,000 a month. And let's say if you just have a $1,500 a month coming from a retirement typical account, you could, in theory, complement the 1,500 with 500 coming from something else. It could be just like a traditional annuity. It could be, money that you're getting from a CD account. It could be money that you're getting from a traditional savings account, or even if you have like a stock, a stocks based account, I don't know, Vanguard, some type of investment that's not related to retirement. But if you can show that you're getting this missing 500 from another type of investment, the Brazilian authority would most probably then not approve your application. All right, Noel. All right, Noel, welcome here to our live stream. Can you also invest in another state than Rio to get citizenship? Yes, no, you are welcome to invest in any state at all, okay? To get citizenship, right? Like, when you invest, you don't get the citizenship automatically. First, you're gonna get the permanent residency, and after 4 years, in theory, you could take a shot at applying for the citizenship. In our more conservative interpretation, you may need to wait for years to apply for citizenship, all right? But so you don't get citizenship by investment, you actually get permanent residency. And then after a few years in Brazil, you would qualify to apply for the citizenship based on the permanent residency you got first. And interesting enough, when you invest in the north or northeast of Brazil, you are actually required a smaller investment than in Rio. Okay, so it's not only okay to invest in other states, you are actually even in a better position, or meaning that you're going to invest less if you invest in the north or northeast of Brazil instead of Rio. Okay, Noel? So yes, you are welcome to invest in any state or in any place in Brazil. Terry Roswell, if I already own property in Brazil and I sell it, is there a grace period where you don't have to pay ETU for a new property purchase? Right. So you're talking there are two different taxes that are involved in this potential scenario, right? Like IPTU is the yearly property tax, and if you sell your property, you're no longer required to pay the property tax. Okay. Now there is a specific tax that's triggered when you sell a property, which is the capital gains. Okay, so not sure maybe if you're trying to address the capital gains taxation component, because there is something like this, like if a Brazilian or a tax resident sells a property, the seller has 6 months to reinvest the money, or if you don't reinvest the money in 6 months, then you are bound to pay capital gains, okay? Capital gains, taxes on capital gains on the property that you sold. So because you're talking about selling and buying, I would assume maybe you are actually referring to the taxes on capital gains, okay? But the IPTU, which is the traditional yearly tax, as soon as you sell it, like you don't need to pay, of course, any longer. Like you no longer own the property, you're not gonna pay annual property taxes, okay? Tell me if it is something different that you are referring to, Terry, and we're gonna address it. Donna, correct retirement. All right, Donna. I hope the information I gave you was helpful. Another question from Terry. If I purchase three properties for 334,000 each, total of 1 million over a couple of years, will this qualify for the investment visa, or must the investment be in a single property? As of today, Terry, you can buy multiple properties of a couple of years, and our interpretation, which has been confirmed by the applications we had until this date, is that you can buy multiple properties, and as long as all of the properties qualify, you're gonna basically sum, right? You're gonna be take the total amount that you spent on these properties, and this amount is gonna be used to assess if you met the minimum required amount. A couple of concerns there, Terry, is that, like I said at the beginning of this live, the new federal administration is changing a few things about, immigration in general. Like we're seeing more than a single change, at least a couple of changes. The need for visitor's visa when you're visiting Brazil, that has been postponed 3 times so far, but it does show the intent to change things. The Brazil retirement visa is now requiring additional apostille procedures for the application. They were not being requested before the new administration, so that represents a change. And something important for you to consider: this amount, the 1 million reais amount, it has been the same since 2018, when the President Bolsonaro administration got residency by investment in real estate up in the first place, right? So we're talking about basically like 6 years, right? So it looks like if the current administration is trying to make money out of the immigration framework, increasing this total of 1 million reais, it could be an easy way for the new administration to get more money out of foreign citizens, all right? And this seems to be their desire, particularly if you look at the requirement for U.S. citizens. Again, it's not enforced, but they've been trying for a while to get enforced. So from this perspective, like if you have the opportunity to make a single acquisition for 1 million reais nowadays, I would say it's a safer path than waiting for a couple of years, because most probably than not, there would be a correction in terms of the minimum investment to secure the permanent residency. Okay, for apostille of birth certificate, marriage certificate, criminal records, can this all be combined in one document or must each one have individual apostille header pages? Yes, they need to be separate, Terry, because the purpose of the apostille is for the providing the apostille to affirm that those documents are legit. And say if you're born in New York but you're married in Dallas, right, and you're issuing your criminal records out of California, there is no single state entity that's going to be able to say that the street documents are legit, right? So it makes more sense for these documents to be apostilled separately because, again, it's like the entity providing the apostille is assessing these documents on a case-by-case basis, right? It's not just a formality. Like there is a legal reason for why the Brazilian government is asking for the apostille, and the reason is for a state entity to confirm that these documents are legitimate, right? So if you are bundling up in a single, batch, like, I mean, there is no way for the state entity to say, well, they are all legit, right? It's kind of weird from a legal perspective. So I would recommend for them to be apostilled individually, okay? Is paper apostille required or can it be an apostille, secure PDF? In our interpretation, it gotta be paper-based, okay? You gotta be paper-based. I'm gonna give an example, like when you secure it could be like either a visa or a residency, you need to register at the Polícia Federal in Brazil, and that's a formal procedure. You're gonna take a bunch of papers with you, and you present these papers like in a meeting counter. It could be over a desk. But the point is, like, you're going to be physically showing those documents to the Polícia Federal, to the federal police. And I don't see this process of, like sending, of just saying, well, I actually sent you like an e-apostille over email, right? Like, I mean, they are not used to it. And most probably they're not. You could have an issue. And therefore, my recommendation is for you to have like the paper-based apostille, because that's what like the Brazilian federal police is going to be looking for. And you don't want to, you want to make it easy for people to stamp your documents, for giving your visas, to give your residency. And like I say, I know it's not your case, but sometimes we have clients that want to educate the Brazilian federal police or the Brazilian immigration system. And that's a recipe. That's a recipe for trouble, right? You don't want to be in a condescending position. So again, I'm not saying it's your case. I'm just saying that the e-apostille, in theory, it would be valid in Brazil, but I wouldn't want to be in this position of trying to educate the Brazilian federal police. I would rather give what they are mostly used to receive on a daily basis. All right, Terry. Luciano with O. All right. Again, no problem at all. I'm just sharing. So in your interaction with other Brazilians, you're going to know the distinction. Whenever a name ends in O, it means that like the male version of the name. Whenever it ends in A, it's going to be the feminine version, right? There is probably thousands of names that you could just change the O with an A and make it feminine. So it's pretty interesting, and that's why I'm sharing here with you, okay? All right, Bill, I love your language. What are the best options for me to learn? All right, Bill, like there is Duolingo, there is the Babel apps, but I don't know why people spend a ton of time on those apps and they are still unable to communicate in Portuguese. So I think these apps, they are more like for amusement, for fun, or, to really know some, the basic written aspects of the language. But I think the best options for you to learn is to actually interact with Brazilians. If you want to learn in a more a structured way, another option, there is a bunch of websites, not so much apps, but websites in which you're going to buy a block of lessons with an actual person like living in Brazil, and this person most of the time they're not going to be like a professional teachers. They are going to be more like an individual, doing like something on the side as a language tutor, right? But the good thing is that you're going to be able to practice the language. I think that's the best option for you to learn. So if you are in Brazil, just get yourself out there and start to interact with Brazilians. If you're still in your country of origin, find one of these websites I told you about. Buy a block of 10 lessons and take from there. I know tutors, they have access to materials that you could use, during the lessons, or you could, if you rather have something more structured, you could ask your tutor to get you or to recommend a Brazilian grammar or a language learning hard book. You could buy remotely. It could be from the U.S., from Europe. Amazon, Brazil. They are going to ship out. There is Amazon in Brazil, and they are doing a wonderful job. Doing business in Brazil. You probably know by now that we think it's pretty tough for everyone to do business in Brazil. See red tape and archaic tax, but even worse, labor law framework. So it's a really tough environment for business to succeed. But Amazon is biting the bullet. Like they're surviving, they're doing a great job, and therefore you can buy through Amazon Brazil. And to access Amazon Brazil, you can type in your browser. The URL is amazon.com.br, and you can buy, like really nice language books, and then you and your tutor could follow up the structure in this book for you to learn the language. Okay, Bill? I also love Portuguese. I'm happy that I was born because it's not the easiest language to learn, right? Because we have, it's a more convoluted or more complex, better saying, a language framework, but it is a beautiful language indeed. And if you are serious about a long-term life in Brazil, of course you need to learn the Portuguese, right? Like, I mean, eventually you could want to get the citizenship, and being able to speak a reasonable level of Portuguese is going to be one of the requirements for you to secure the Brazilian citizenship and passport, right? Pretty surprisingly, in other countries like the US, which is much tougher for you to get to the point in which you're going to secure citizenship, but the US surprisingly is going to, the U.S. immigration, they are going to even offer you like a translator during the interview for the citizenship, which is mind blowing, to us Brazilians, but not Brazil. Brazil wants you to speak Portuguese, so no translator, no interpreter. Like if you applying for the Brazilian citizenship, you must speak reasonable Portuguese, right? So there you go. Okay, Bill, how can I contact you? Bill, so, like we offer a bunch of free resources online. We offer an opportunity for prospective clients to know a lot about Brazil, about procedures. We have, content. We have literally hundreds of videos, but when it's time to talk to us, you need to schedule a paid consultation, all right? That's how you contact us. It's like you go to our website, go to the contact us page, and then you schedule a consultation. If you have any nuanced conversation to have with us, that's the way you're going to be able to do so. Now, if you just need to know, well, how much do you charge to help me with the retirement visa? How much do you charge to help us with the uh, golden visa? How much do you charge to help me with the digital nomad visa? Then you just send an email. You basically send an email to info@oliveralawyers.com, and we're going to give you the quote, okay? You don't need to schedule a consultation to have a quote. But if there is any nuance, anything you need to discuss at all, you need to schedule a paid consultation, all right? There was another a participant here in a live stream not long ago. He said, well, I think you should try to convince me, right? Well, if you think we should convince you to use our services, maybe we're not the right fit. We understand, that the Brazilian Bar Association, they actually prohibit lawyers from offering free consultation. So it's not just like a choice that we think it's right. It's also a mandate by the Brazilian Bar Association, no free consultation. So if you don't think it's the right time, feel free to come back to our live streams. We are happy to chat with you as much as we want. We actually thank you guys for coming to our live stream. A live stream has no purpose if there are no people attending, so I actually appreciate your participation. But again, Bill, if you need to talk to us, schedule a consultation, just go to the Contact Us page. There is a link you can schedule, find a time of your preference, and we're going to be happy to discuss all the specifics of your situation, provide the recommendations, and so on. M and Gold, what are the additional benefits of Brazilian citizenship over permanent residency? Yes, that's a good question. Like the citizenship is something that nobody is going to, in theory, take away from you. And the permanent residency, which, by the way, I like this question because there is no such thing as a permanent residency nowadays in Brazil. They actually call undefined or undetermined, meaning that there is no limit in time, but they don't also want to tell you that it's permanent, because if they tell you it's permanent, then it could make it more difficult for them to take away from you if they decided to do so. So the Brazilian citizenship is something definite. You don't need to worry. For instance, like if the basis for your permanent residency is through for the purchase of real estate, in theory, even 20 years down the road, you sell the property, you lose your permanent residency card, and if you apply for a new one, it's very well possible for the Brazilian immigration to say, you know what, let me see if you are still the owner of the property that got you the residency in the first place. And if you sold the property, guess what? Maybe they're not going to renew your resident card, right? So the citizenship, you don't have the situation anymore. You can sell the property, or if you acquired the citizenship through marriage, you don't need to be concerned about remaining married just for the sake of remaining as a permanent resident. So the citizenship is a different level, right? Another thing, if you're a citizen, you can, for instance, you can vote. You have voting rights. You're not gonna face limitations in terms of buying rural land. Okay, so for a citizen, you don't even need a visa. Let's say if you are abroad and if you want to buy an apartment in Rio, you could do that with 0 visas, right? You could do that remotely. You just need a CPF and money, and you buy a property in Rio de Janeiro, right? An apartment. Now, if you want to buy rural property, things change dramatically. Like there is a bunch of prohibitions. You're gonna be allowed to buy like small properties only. People get really spooked when you try to buy property in the Amazon. If you want to buy properties in certain areas that Brazil is considered as terreno de marinha, or close to military bases. So as a permanent resident, you are still a foreign citizen, and you're going to have many types of restrictions, right? Like in terms of rights in Brazil, or the types of properties you can buy. And when you become a citizen, of course, like all of those restrictions, they go out of the window, all right? And in addition to new status in which you're not going to need to worry about someone taking your residency away. All right, MN Gold, I hope this helps. Bill, is the $2,000 a requirement for all the visas? What about the investment citizenship? So the $2,000 a month is just for the retirement visa, Bill. It's not for every single visa, right? Just a distinction. Digital nomad, you actually need 1,500, like 1.5 thousand reais a month. So the digital nomad visa is a simple example of a different requirement. For the investment, for the permanent residency investment visa, let's say if you're buying property, they don't have any specific requirement for your monthly income. So let's say if you're buying a 1 million reais property in Rio de Janeiro, they are not going to ask you for any specific dollar amount per month. However, they still want to see that you do have some type of money coming every month, because a property by itself is not enough for you, to live, right? So they're going to give you the permanent residency, but they still want to see that you have some source of income. But in theory, again, there is no such number written anywhere. But if you're making $1,000 a month and you're buying a 1 million reais property in Brazil, I'm sure that this $1,000 a month of income would be enough for you to secure the permanent residency. All right, Bill? Kituel, valeu, até a próxima vez. Thank you, Kit, for participating. True Life, can you obtain Brazilian citizenship through buying property? Yes, True Life, it's going to be later down the road, right? Like you buy property, qualifying property, right? Like there are about 12 specific requirements for your transaction to qualify. And, it's astonishing to us that people are going to go out there, they're going to buy property on their own, and then they're going to come back to us and say, well, now I want to apply for the residency, right? And then, I don't know, like maybe 40% of the cases, we're going to say, well, you bought the wrong way, we're not going to be able to help you, right? And then the person is going to get really mad. And then I'm going to say, listen, but you bought the 1 billion reais property and you didn't think about even getting a consultation to review the property before buying. And they say, well, I don't know, Brazil is too complex. And then, of course, right, like you're going to either shoot the messenger or shoot the entire country. And that's not how things work. If you're going to apply for a residency, before you sign a purchase contract, you need to have this thing reviewed by a licensed attorney. It doesn't need to be us. Just make yourself a favor and do not sign a purchase agreement before getting the transaction reviewed by an attorney, all right? But going back to the Brazilian citizenship question from True Life, so first you're going to get, as long as you buy a qualifying property, you're going to get the residency. First you get a temporary residency, like the first 4 years. And then you're going to get something that's called technically the undefined residency, meaning there is no limit in time. People are going to mention as a permanent residency, but again, the Brazilian government tries to avoid this language, because if you sell the property, in theory, they could take away your residency, all right? So that's why it's not called the permanent residency. But, just to simplify, buy qualifying property, get the residency, and then later on, you can apply for the Brazilian citizenship, all right, True Life? Terry, if I am in Brazil on a tourist visa, can I marry a Brazilian and stay in Brazil? Is this an easier way to get the residency citizenship because the marriage certificate will be issued in Brazil? Yes, Terry. That's very common, okay? Actually, a lot of people, they go to Brazil and they want to stay in Brazil. Maybe they don't have the money. They find a partner. They say, listen, I'm not sure if this is going to last forever, but can we marry because, it's going to allow me to stay here for good. And then they marry, and marriage has a super high priority. in the Brazilian immigration framework, and not surprisingly, in a few months, you could secure the permanent residency based on marriage. Okay, it's much easier than it would be in the US. In Brazil, if you have a Brazilian marriage certificate, it's really, really easy to get the permanent residency. Okay, we do that every single month. I mean, we don't advise. I mean, we do that. I mean, we assist applicants with such residency in Brazil, and we never had a single denial. Of course, we do some we do a check on the requirements prior to getting an applicant aboard. And if there is something too crazy, we're not going to actually assist the person with the application. But the truth is, like for every single permanent residency based on marriage application we had here at the firm, we never had a denial. Okay, so pretty solid route. Thank you. I appreciate all your responses. Thank you, Bill, for participating. I hope to see you again in our live streams. Germon, will I need to come to Brazil to get the CPF, or can I get through the consulate in the States? Yes, Germon, you can get the CPF in any Brazilian consulate in the US. During COVID, there was actually a pretty easy route. Like you could basically do this application by email. And this thing was working until October of last year, right? So we had a whole guide on our website basically explaining to you how you could apply by email, and in roughly 10 to 15 days you would have the CPF by email, right? Like you wouldn't need to leave your home for that. Unfortunately, whenever there is something easy, streamlined, Brazilian authorities, they're going to look at it and say, well, this thing does not look like Brazil. That's too easy too easy for foreign citizens to do. I'm kind of joking, but it's kind of the reality, right? Like, I mean, Brazilian culture loves red tape and bureaucracy. So until October, to get a CPF, it was a breeze. Like you could read our guide, and literally in 30 minutes, you would get your CPF. Now this door is closed, and you're going to either apply through a Brazilian or embassy consulate abroad. Second option, once you are in Brazil, you're going to, knock on a few different doors like Banco do Brasil, even like the Brazilian Postal Service. But most probably, I would recommend you to go to the Brazilian Revenue Service. They have a few departments in each city that could help you with the application. So that would be the second route. And the third route is going to be through a power of attorney, okay? If you have an address in Brazil, we are able to get you the CPF done through a power of attorney. We do that every single week for many clients, and it takes roughly a month. Okay, so now it's taking more time, unfortunately, but we are able to do so. You need to have an address, because one of the components for the application to a power of attorney is for the foreign citizen to say that they have a residence in Brazil, right? So we cannot give you the address for our firm, because that would be basically a lie. Like I'm saying so because some prospects, they ask, well, can I just use your law firm's address in Brazil? I say, no, you cannot, because you're going to be signing a declaration that you reside at that address, right? So you got to have a separate address, and as long as you have that, we can get the CPF issued for you based on a paperwork. Unfortunately, again, it's not a simple power of attorney. There is a few different documents that we need to get in place. But you could do either in the US, you could do through a consulate or embassy, you could do that while visiting Brazil, or you could hire us to do that for you as a power of attorney holder. MN Gold, can you talk about options for enrolling children in Brazilian school after age 10 whose first language is English? MN Gold, you're going to have two different routes. One route is going to be like a private school, and the English component. There are in the largest Brazilian cities, in every single large Brazilian city, you're going to find a bilingual school in which English is pretty common. okay? Particularly in São Paulo and Rio de Janeiro, there are schools for foreign citizens, and basically all the classes are in English, okay? And some classes they are in Portuguese. So of course, the foreign citizen child can also learn Portuguese, okay? So that's super common, but this is going to be, of course, a private school, right? And expensive, by the way, right? Like whenever there is something that's designed for foreign citizens, you could think about, I don't know, 2 or 3 thousand US dollars a month. Okay, that's going to be a guess, particularly for Rio, São Paulo, Brasilia, other cities. I don't know, like if you're talking about Fortaleza, which is like in the northeast of the country, probably 1,500 instead of 2 to 3,000. Okay, but this is going to be one of the two routes. The other route is going to be like public school or a regular private school. And trust me, like we've been seeing this over and over. Children, they learn a second language in a snap. Okay, so if your child is between 10 and 15, I would say they're going to learn in Portuguese in no time. You're going to be surprised. Like in a couple of months, they're going to be talking fluent Portuguese. So I wouldn't worry that much about getting a school in which English is going to be the main language. Actually, the opposite. Like if you want your child to be like an international citizen of the world, speaking multiple languages, I think the ideal route is the opposite. Like you just throw them, to the sharks. Like it's a joke, but just let them survive in a Brazilian school, and trust me, in a couple of months they are going to be speaking fluent Portuguese, astonishingly, right? Like, I mean, by this age, they absorb, the new language as a sponge, and see that happening, okay? Terry Roswell, thanks, Luciano, very helpful. And the sun is finally coming up here in New Zealand. All right, we have many clients from New Zealand, Terry. Really nice to see that we have clients, all over the world. We have most of our clients in the area. They're actually from Australia, but not surprisingly, some from New Zealand as well. Really appreciate your candid, informative responses. Thank you for participating, Terry. I hope to see you in our next lives. German, okay, many thanks. I will be reaching out to your law firm about the CPF services. All right, German, it's going to be a pleasure assisting you. We are now 1 hour of 1 hour time of interacting with our participants here in our live stream. So we're going to be finishing up in a couple of minutes. Remember that we have another live stream on Wednesday, okay? So if you are going over, today's topics that we discussed over here and new questions pop up, just, take note of your questions and come back on Wednesday. We're going to have another live stream. And on Wednesday, our live stream is going to be at 12:30 Rio de Janeiro time. Okay, 12:30 Rio de Janeiro time. See you on Wednesday. You guys have a nice rest of your Sunday and a blessed week ahead. Thank you again for participating, and see you on Wednesday.